I owned a CrossFit gym for so many years, and I'd
Yeah.
always see people practicing their handstands and handstand walks. And at
Yeah.
times it would get excessive and people would injure their shoulders or, so maybe what we could do, and you're absolutely right. It's hard to say it'll take you exactly this many weeks if you do it this many times, because
Right.
depends also on where you're starting. Hey, Shana, nice to see you again.
Hey, I'm so glad that we found this time to connect.
Yeah, me too. And, so much about your story. I mean, there's so much to unpack here, and we're going to get into all that in just a moment. But what I love so much is that, first of all, you don't look like you're in your 50s. Okay. You're still a beast doing handstands. There's so many beautiful times in your life that you really just followed your heart, which a lot of us actually get stuck doing. And so there's so
Yeah.
many things I want to ask you today, but I think before we get started, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into yoga.
Sure. Wow, that a little bit. Okay, let me try to make this quick. Okay, so
No, go for it, girl. Go for it.
that's okay. So my background, honestly, was I'm just like lifelong athlete. I can't remember a day in my life, like literally, like go back to like pre-school that I did not like play sports all day or whatever. So it's always like been in my blood to do physical things. Um, that being said, yoga was sort of like the furthest from my mind of anything that I would ever see myself doing, right? Because my perception of yoga was sitting on the floor and humming, right? And so when I say I came to yoga on accident, I mean, literally, I came to an accident. I was walking around my condo. I accidentally like kicked, not like kicked, like in anger, like I was walking around, I ran into a piece of furniture, broke my pinky toe, and could not put on a shoe for, whatever, a few weeks,
So
whatever it
painful.
was. And I
So
couldn't
painful.
do, it was crazy
It's
painful.
crazy
And it's
painful.
funny. Yeah, because it's like you think, oh, well, if I could do without anything in the world, how about a pinky toe, right? But it was excruciating. It turns out you can't really, I mean, unless you're born without a pinky toe, you can't really walk like if your pinky toe is broken.
Yeah.
And it seems like this little tiny thing, but I think it's a really good metaphor for life is that sometimes we don't realize how much the little tiny things are going to have such tremendous impacts in our lives. And in this case, pinky toe changed the whole trajectory of my life. I my foot was like getting to the point of like walkable, but not runnable or spinnable or anything like in a shoeable. I'm like, I'll try this stupid yoga thing. And that day I knew.
Wow.
And I, within months, like left a successful career. I was simultaneously getting my MBA here at UCLA. I left my MBA program and I'm like, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. And it just made a lot of sense to me. And so I did. It was a huge leap of faith that paid off.
Wow. That's amazing. And what I take from just your energy, you're a go 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 person, you're super hardcore. Nothing really
Yeah.
stops you. So then even just to see you being forced to slow down, which by the way, I think is always a sign for us from whatever higher power that we connect with to make some shifts, to make some changes. And that always happens to me. Like every single time I need to make a big shift in my life, it's because I unfortunately got really, really ill or got injured in some way. And so it's like, Sherry, wake up, time to make some changes. And so what's interesting too is that was always my conception around yoga too, is that it's like, what, I'm just gonna sit there and stretch? Like, what do you mean? I'm a runner, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm hardcore, I lift weights, like I do all these intense things. And then like yoga's not intense. And it is one of the most intense forms of connecting with your body that I've ever endured, if you give yourself patience and an opportunity to do it with the proper teacher, of course. So I want to get into that, but first what I'm also curious about is how you make this decision that I'm going to drop out of, I don't want to say the word drop out, I'm going to shift from master school onto a career in yoga. And this was back I think in 2000 or 2001, right? So yoga wasn't even like
Yeah.
this big thing yet. So what was that drive behind that? Because I'm really curious. A lot of us want to make these big shifts in our lives, And yet there's so much fear that stops us and uncertainty. How did you have the courage to do that?
So, boy, there's so many answers to that question. The first thing is, I have to be honest, Sherry, it was visceral. It wasn't a thought. Like,
Mm.
it wasn't like, oh, this might be an interesting thing to do. It was like, I knew instantly that this is what I had been looking for my whole life. Like, I knew instantly that first class, I'm like, where have you been all my life, yoga? And so that was number one. Number two, and there's like 100, but I'm just going to go into two. How about? Number two was that I was always, I'm still a perfectionist, but like a perfectionist to a fault.
Mhm.
Okay. To the point where it was disabling me in ways
Mhm.
because like I could never be good enough. Nothing I did was good enough. And when you truly believe that nothing you do is good enough, then nothing anybody else does is good enough either. And you wind up judging the world by this untenable standard that sets up this paradigm for failure, right? Because none of us is perfect and it's inevitable. And the harder you press down on yourself, the more you're going to really destroy yourself. There's no other way of putting it. And so what happened was yoga was the first time and I discovered yoga just before my 30th birthday. So I wasn't like a spring chicken or anything. And it was the first time in my life that anybody had ever told me it was okay to fall.
Huh.
And I think, especially in this generation where it's like, you cannot fail. And I actually believe that, but they grow up with that. Like in the 70s, everything was a competition. Everything, I mean, it was just normal life. There was none of like sort of, I hate to use the word, but the coddling that we have today. And it was just such an ultra competitive environment that I grew up in, whether it was academic, yeah, whether it was, in sports, whether it doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, what do you mean it's okay to fall?
Mm.
Right? I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this when I was 3? Why am I hearing this when I'm 30? And so the big epiphany, honestly, was not I have to teach yoga. It was I have to teach yoga to children.
Wow.
And so when I launched, it was actually my Mini Yogis Yoga for Kids program, which the notion of yoga for children in 2002 was like ridiculous at best. And because I loved the practice so much, it wound up being, of course, like adults too, which is my Yoga Athletica program. But the internal imperative came from like a message that I needed to make a difference in future generations. And so it really came from that kernel.
Wow. Wow. That's so interesting. And I also see this other part of it, which is your energy. You're very fiery. You're very dynamic, which I love. And even just your eyes are so youthful. So you have all this bubbly energy. And yoga helps us become more centered. It helps us find our centered. It helps us connect with mind, with body, with spirit. And so what was that like for you? So you say the first time you walked into a yoga class, you're like, I'm home. Like this is it. Like this is
Right.
what I've always been looking for. How do you
Yep.
go from do, I need to be so perfect, I'm told I'm not allowed to fail, to finding that
Right.
center and giving yourself permission to fail and to really just stay in that truth of who you are?
Well, it's so funny, Sherry, that you say do, because I literally say that in order to like succeed at yoga, you have to shift to do.
Oh, good. Love it.
So, so because um listen, yoga is not a practice of just laying back and let life happen, right? So we've got the yamas and niyamas, which are, the code of conduct of yoga. And in it, we have right next to each other in the niyamas, we have santosha, which is contentment, and tapas, which is fire. Mm-hmm. Right? Because what's contentment without fire is complacency. Mm-hmm. So I don't take out the do. I am a doer. Believe me, I'm a doer. I'm an overdoer. But there has to be the yin and the yang, right? Like, so the do is the masculine and the be is the feminine.
Yes.
Right? So dooby dooby doo. And I think that I don't think the reason why A, yoga resonated with me, and B, why it was so easy for me to make that shift was because my first teacher and mentor, who was Brian Cast, did not shy away from the deeper aspects of the practice. He wasn't there to just put us in a pose. In fact, I wound up moving on to other teachers because he wasn't challenging me on a physical level. He wasn't teaching me new poses. He wasn't really that interested in alignments or the physicality. And even though it's such a physical practice, his actual goal was to impart the philosophy. And it's funny because so many people would complain that, Brian talks too much, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, like, keep it coming, keep it coming. I felt like he was talking to me. Like, I'm like, how do you know me? So like, he had no idea who I was. Like, I'm brand new in the class. I'm like, you're talking to me. This is my life. You're speaking my language. And so I think that the reason I was able to make the shift is with me, I need to know the reason. Like, I don't do anything unless I know why. I am so not a sheeple. I am so not like somebody who goes with crowds and does what people do, unless I know deep inside it makes sense to me, it resonates with me. And so right out of the gate, it's funny, and I don't mean this in a judgy way, but it's funny to me when people do like just a physical yoga asana practice, like just straight up, just physical, and they're like, "Oh, it's so spiritual." And I'm like, "Why?" I don't know. I just feel like transcending, blah, blah, blah. I mean, these are people who never read the text, who never get into it. And so maybe that's the magic of yoga. Maybe it does help us transcend, but it helped me a lot to have a teacher who said, when you practice yoga, this, and this is going to happen. And you are going to view life in this, and this way. And you're going to let go of this, and this, right? Yeah. And so it sort of laid out a pathway that made it very easy to shift or pivot.
Right. Wow, that's really powerful. And I think a lot of us, especially here in the West, we do view yoga as this physical form of exercise. It's just this physical thing that you do with your body, not really understanding what that root yoga even means, the word union. And I know you talk about the 10 commandments of yoga as well, and maybe now's a good chance to just dive into that a little bit. Something that you talk about often are the 10 commandments of yoga. So this is a big foundation of how you teach. Maybe you can dive into that a little bit. What are the 10 commandments of yoga?
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's interesting because, and by the way, they're not really called the 10 commandments of yoga. That's just a colloquial.
That's Shana's language.
And it's funny you should ask, because I happen to be like on my Vimeo channel right now. Like I just did like month 2, each month I'm doing like a talk on one of the yamas or niyamas for 10 months. So I just finished week 2. So let's see. So the 10 precepts, the first 5 are the yamas. Okay. A yama means an abstention, the things we don't do. It is how we deal with the world outside of us. So it's ahimsa, which is nonviolence, satya, which is truth, asteya, non-stealing, brahmacharya, which is open to interpretation. Literally it means celibacy, but most people just use it as like moderation in all things. That's a loose interpretation. And number 5 is a parigraha, which is non-greed. So you'll see that these parallel a lot of these, like the actual 10 commandments, which is interesting, right? Because spirituality. the niyamas, which are the observances, right? So yamas, what we don't do, observances are what we do, deal with how we deal with ourselves and sort of the universe, right? Like, so because there is no self in yoga, okay? The self in yoga has a capital S, and it means the energy or soul that I share with the universe.
Yes.
But we don't have a small s self in yoga, right? Which this is the hardest concept, I think, for most people, is letting go of the ego. What I do for me. So when it comes to the niyamas, the first one is saucha, which is purity, cleanliness, inside, outside, spiritual, the whole bit, like just staying clean. Then, as discussed, we've got santosha, which is contentment. We've got tapas, which is fire. Then we have one that people misunderstand a lot, which is svadhyaya. Now, svadhyaya means self-study, but here's what's interesting. In the West, because people are so programmed to think of little s self, they think that svadhyaya is self-study, like going inside, going to therapy, and making yourself a better person. Now, while all of those are good things to do, if you let go of your ego, you know that it's not little s, it's big S. And what svadhyaya is, self-study with a big capital S, actually means studying scripture. Whether it's the Yoga Sutras, whether it's the Torah, whether it's the New Testament, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, the I Ching, like it doesn't matter. But svadhyaya is actually studying the greater self, meaning God. Like, it's really God, because what's the last niyama, and this is so interesting because it really is the first commandment of the Judeo-Christian Bible, worded differently. It's Ishvara Pranidhana, which means like submission to a higher power. Now, what's so interesting about that is that it never defines that higher power.
Right.
So for everybody who says that yoga is a Hindu practice,
right,
or some people say it's a Buddhist practice, whatever, it's not. It's actually just a pan-spiritual practice meant to connect you to the higher power that you actually get to define yourself. Yes. So those are the 10 commandments of yoga. Is that too much information?
No, this is so good. And that's exactly it. You get to the root of Atman, connecting and uniting with Para-Atman. Like that's really what it is just understanding and being aware of the greater world around you. And why I want you to share this is because, again, here in the Western world, yoga is this physical thing. We turn on a lot of heat in a room and then we sweat it out, and maybe we do some push-ups and crunches and add that in, which also is not really yoga. But then we don't have this opportunity to actually get into these beautiful 10 commandments, as you call them, and understand that it's even greater than us, and allow ourselves to even just step away from this self-concept that we've created and how we view the world all the time, just based on us, what's good for me, everything is about me, not realizing that we are connected to everything, and we are part of that greater capital S that you talk about. So this is so beautiful. And I love how you share it too. It's so tangible, it's so easy to understand, and it's very, very simple. So you do a really great job in that. And I know it looks like you have one more thing to add before I get into handstands. Is that true? You have one more thing to add about that?
Okay. What other thing would you to add?
Okay, I just see this enthusiasm. Your eyes are so constantly enthusiastic, Shannon. It's hard to keep up a little bit with gorgeous energy.
Oh, I always have things to add. I mean, one thing I was going to say is that, so the yamas and niyamas come from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And I really do believe that if you're going to read one yogic text, read the Bible. It's not literally a Bible, the Bible of yoga, right? And it's all about, really all it's about is quieting your mind. And it literally, like the Yoga Sutras, it's the second sutra, we're here to quiet the modifications of the mind. And they say that if you could do that second sutra, you could ignore the rest of the book. But this is major stuff. But I think that for I mean, books 3 and 4 are all about magical, literally about magical powers, literally about magical powers that come when you apply everything that you learn in books 1 and 2. But for all practical intents and purposes, I really do believe that the yamas and niyamas give people enough of a foundation, literally, to live a more yogic life.
Mm-hmm.
And also that the sutra is like a sutra.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a suture, right? It's a stitch. It's an incomplete thought, which means it's so broadly open to interpretation that it's great to meditate on, to think about. And like, honestly, I've read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali so many dozens of times,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like some weird, like Harry Potter book that every time I read it, I'm like, what?
Right.
Like, where did that come from? Right. And every time I discover something different. Is it different words on the page? No.
Right.
Is that the more you read it, the more you understand it, and the more you understand yourself, and the more you understand your place in the universe.
So good. Oh, I love everything that you said. That is so, so powerful. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And sometimes when we're ready for that information, that's the right time to receive it. And it's just this beautiful journey, and that's how we grow and continue to expand. And speaking of growing and expanding, talk to me about handstands because that's a big part of your foundation as well. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't even believe this. So if anyone's listening and you check out Shana's YouTube channel and her website and just see her in action because this is crazy. She's in her 50s, which is so beautiful. Like these are my goals. I always follow women that are older than me, and that's where I want to go. Like they're doing it, I'm going to do it too. So why are handstands so important as a foundation? Why do you teach them? And more importantly, how can you help somebody who is maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s thinking, I could never do that? How could you help them get to the place where they can actually do handstands as well?
Boy, that's a lot of questions. Okay. Um, I'll start with the pink elephant. I'm actually going to be 53 tomorrow is actually my birthday. So
Oh, happy
I
birthday. Oh, lucky us. And we get her on our show. That's awesome.
thank you. And some women get so embarrassed about their age, or they don't want to tell people their age, or they lie about their age. I'm like, you know what? I'm damn proud. The things that I can do with my body at 53, I'm like, bring it on. So let me start backwards. Your last question was like, how about somebody who's like, I could never do that? So that's easy. That's the easiest one to answer, is that if you believe that, you're right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so that's the end of that story.
So good.
Unless you understand the flip side of that, which is if you don't believe that, you're also right.
Yeah.
Um, Oddly enough, I've had 3 women in their 70s in my handstand breakthrough revolution course. And
Whoa.
it's funny because when they contact me, I'm not gonna lie. At first, I'm like, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" But it doesn't matter. Like they're like, I want to do a handstand before I die. I'm 72, I'm 73, I'm 74, whatever. And there's no time like today. And the truth is, there is no time like today.
Yeah.
Now, can anybody do a handstand? The answer is if you have 2 arms, I'm gonna argue yes.
Wow.
And here's what's funny, not like haha funny, but funny-ish, because I'm saying if you have two arms, you could do a handstand. If you could believe it, I've had not one. I mean, this is a little odd, but 2 women who only had one hand do handstands with me because you only need an arm. Because all they had was a wrist on one hand. They didn't know each other. It's just a coincidence, but it's still a balance point. Is their balance going to be different? Yes.
Mhm.
I've taken men who are like, I had a man who was like, if you looked at him, he would laugh at himself because he's like, everybody laughs when they see me in yoga because they're like, what is that guy doing? He had this huge tummy, and he was in his probably 40s or 50s at the time, and he was doing it all. Like, so if anybody really believes they can't do something, my first question I would ask them is why? Like why do you believe that?
Right.
Because that's the first thing that has to go. But it's not going to go until you understand what the belief is behind that. Now, we talk so much about self-limiting beliefs, so I don't want to be like a broken record. But we all have them. We all have them in certain aspects of our life. I have them.
Mhm.
And in fact, what I try to do, like literally, like the work that I've been working on the last year or two, is to be like, I have 100% complete confidence on the mat. 100%. No matter what I try, I'm going to be able to do it. Doesn't mean I could do it on the first try, but I know I could do it. I'm like, why aren't I bringing, like, just replicating that faith, because I know it works, into every single part of my life, right? And so I'm really focusing a lot on replicating processes right now. That's my personal process. But so why handstands? Because handstands, A, they're a function of faith. B, they excuse me, they teach you incredible patience, right? Because you might fall, I forget about 10 times, literally thousands of times. I'm sure I fell, I never counted, thousands of times before I hit my handstand in the middle of the room. And, you know, for the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years, I remember how 10 years probably, I've been traveling the world as this handstand expert, right? Teaching people to do handstands, but they don't see the 5,000 times that I fell.
Right.
And so many people, yeah, they're giving up on fall number 97 because they're like, really? I've tried 100 times. I'm okay, but you're never going to know which one you're going to hit until you hit it. So keep going. Right. So it teaches you perseverance. It teaches you non-reactivity, which is not freaking out when things aren't going your way, and also not freaking out when you fall, right? Getting back up, dusting yourself off and saying, okay, I fell. Something's going to have to change. I'm going to make sure I'm not going to die in this process. And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to nail my hands down. So it's like this function of skill set. Yes. But mindset, and the people who get the mindset piece are the ones who are succeeding like crazy, even when they're missing a hand, even when they're in their 70s. And the people who don't get the mindset piece, they usually wind up plateauing.
Right. Yeah, and so obvious what you're saying is also not just about handstand. This is every aspect of our lives, and it's so clear. If I have the confidence to practice yoga, to be able to do a handstand after falling a gazillion times, what can't I take on in life, right? Just again, it's just that building that self-confidence and self-belief. I love everything that you're saying, and this is again, if anyone's listening, I would say go back and just rewind those last 5 minutes and listen to that again, and then add that to every part of your life, because that's how powerful that was. So how long then, and I know this is such an open-ended question, but how long then should a person practice handstand in one session, and how many times a week, let's say, if they're working on it, without fatiguing themselves, without injuring their shoulders? What would you say, like, okay, here are the guardrails?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just say, just going back one step, the handstand breakthrough revolution is handstand and mindset put together.
Yeah.
And it's 15 hours, and it's both of them. Like, it's very much about like fostering both skill set and mindset on and off the mat. I know people say that all the time, but there's literally an off the mat component where we need to goal set, not just a handstand, but what are you doing the other 23 and a half hours a day? You know? So anyway, to answer the question, when I was learning handstands, in addition to practicing for an hour and a half every day, I would do practicing yoga, like just a normal yoga practice. I was going to yoga class, is what I'm saying. Sorry. Then I would come home and do 10 minutes of just dedicated handstand work. Okay. So I believe, and not everyone agrees, that handstand is like the consummate yoga pose. Meaning, take everything you do in your yoga practice and put it into one pose, and you wind up with one of two things: handstand or shavasana. And neither is more powerful than the other, by the way, but they're just poles of the same continuum. Excuse me. So 10 minutes handstand practice, didn't matter what I was doing, what it looked like, how much I was falling, whether I was using a wall, whether I wasn't using a wall, what drill I was doing, it doesn't matter. I was moving the needle every day. So I would say, but, so 10 minutes a day would be a nice start. The women who have been, I have two women in particular who, one was nailing after 8 weeks, like over 30 seconds consistently. which is not just a balance. At that point, you're also dealing with a lot of strength, building as well. And the other one was going upwards of 45 seconds consistently. Now, I'd say like a minute is sort of like the handstand holy grail. Everybody's like, oh, I want to hold it for a minute. I have my opinions on that, but whatever. Both of these women, if I'm going to be totally honest, and they just did the 8-week program in 8 weeks because it's recording. So you could do it for 8 months. You could do it for 8 years. You could do it in 8 weeks. It's up to you. I know that one of them was practicing about 30 minutes to 45 minutes a day.
Wow. Okay.
And not everybody has that on her handstands.
Right.
Just on handstands. Because it was a real goal.
Right.
So to answer your question, I wish there was like a one size fits all answer because people ask me this all the time. I'd love to say like do a half hour a day and you'll have it in a week, do 10 minutes a day, you'll have it in 8 weeks, do it, but some people are going to have a supernatural facility for it. And some people, it can take a really long time. But like, as far as I'm concerned, you just got to appreciate the process and the integrity really is in the effort. It's not in the perceived like final pose, right?
Yeah. It's always a journey. And I asked this question because, I owned a CrossFit gym for so many years and I'd always see people practicing their handstands and handstand walks. And at times it would get excessive and people would injure their shoulders or, so maybe what we could do, and you're absolutely right. It's hard to say it'll take you exactly this many weeks if you do it this many times, because it depends also on where you're starting, what type of strength that you already have as a base. And maybe you did gymnastics when you were younger, or maybe you had a sport that would easily translate into it. So what would you say then is a red flag? So again, for those of us trying, and then we are going to share your course as well in our show notes for those that are interested in joining and are ready to work on the mindset part as well. So what would you say then is a red flag to start to ease off and maybe rest the shoulder girdle?
Sure. I mean, so as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing on earth worth hurting yourself over. Nothing. Not yoga. If it means that you never hit the yoga mat again because everything you do hurts, then don't go on the yoga mat again. I mean, that's how much I believe in it. I think that again, like if we're going to be totally honest, it's going to come back to ego. It all comes back to ego. The only time people are going to hurt themselves is when they push themselves past their edge. When we don't accept where we are and it's so funny. I have people who come to me, they're like, Shana, I want to learn how to so sort of like my signature move or whatever I call like my superfly firefly, which is going from sitting to handstand, right? And I through the firefly, right? Like a press. And they're like, I want to learn how to do it. I'm like, okay, let's work on it. It turns out they can't even do a handstand. And I'm like, okay, well, first you got to learn to do a handstand. I mean, it's like somebody giving birth to a baby and going, here, Sean, teach them how to run.
Right.
Well, first they have to learn how to lift their head. Then maybe flip over, maybe crawling, walking, there are other things. In part of it is when we learn to appreciate the small victories, then we no longer feel like we have to push to some perceived goal. They say you will never master a yoga pose in a lifetime. That includes me. I mean, there's always something else. And I'll tell you, Sherry, I work and have for at least 10 minutes a day for many years, my one-handed handstands. Drill, 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 drill. And I literally in about the last month, I'm finally hitting a consistent 3 seconds.
Wow.
Okay. So why didn't I give up? Why do I keep doing this? A, if there's no challenge in my life, then I'm not growing anymore. But B, again, I have fun with the process. And on those days that maybe I get 4 seconds and it's like this great miracle, I'm like, oh my God. I know it's not a real hold, but I'm like, wow, 10 years later, I'm getting 4 seconds. Maybe tomorrow I'll get 5, and I think that again, like life lessons, when we start appreciating our baby steps, then we don't have to get so obsessed with the big leaps, because if you're talking injuries, which was your original question, I went off on a tangent. Which one are you going to hurt yourself with? If I take 10 baby steps across the room, the chance of my falling are none. But if I like take a running jump and try to land above those stairs that you can't see, I have a much greater chance of like tumbling and like really hurting myself. Right. So people have to like be willing to go back to baby steps.
So good.
Sometimes start from scratch.
Wow, that's so good. I love that. I love everything that you say. I love your energy, and I loved our conversation today. And I can't believe that our time is up already, Shana. You're so easy to talk to and just so much wisdom. And I love this because I love bringing on different yoga teachers. And even though we all share the same philosophy, the way that we present it and how we present it is always very special. And you've brought that today. So I thank you so much for that. So if somebody wanted to reach out to learn more about you or to connect with you, where could they go to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that I have all my social links and the links to my Handstand Breakthrough Revolution course and all the things right on my Yoga Athletica website. So it's probably the easiest way, rather than my rattling off like 100 different websites. Yoga Athletica has one A in the middle. I know everybody spells this incorrectly. And it will be in the show notes. But if you go to yogaathletica.com, you'll see my YouTube, my Vimeo classes, my handstand breakthrough, my Facebook, my Instagram, all the things. And you'll also be able to contact me directly. I do privates as well, both online and live in Los Angeles.
Amazing. We will definitely add all that to the show notes. So thanks again
Yep.
so much for your time, Shana. I love this conversation.
Thank you. So do I. Thank you so much for having me.